When the game Homeworld was released back in 1999, which means about 25 years ago, I was thrilled and fascinated by it. Growing up with strategy games, this was a mind-blowing experience. 3D space strategy set in the vastness of the universe, with beautiful graphics and that sense of loneliness when you're alone on the map until an enemy attacks, and then you witness a spectacular battle. All those seemingly small ships flying around, firing at each other, it was breathtaking, especially when you zoomed in and found yourself in the midst of the entire skirmish. Of course, on my computer at the time, the game barely ran at 20 frames per second. It was more like a slideshow. But hey, that was normal back then. Pain you had to endure if you wanted to play something because, well, those were tough times. When I first dove into Homeworld, one thing was challenging: orienting myself in that 3D environment. Up, down, forward, backward, left, right, you could move absolutely anywhere, which could be confusing. The worst part was that it still confused me every time I launched the game after some time, even years later when I played the remastered versions of the first and second games. With Deserts of Karak, the franchise deviated slightly from the original concept, but it finally returned with Homeworld 3, which I still haven't had the chance to play. In the meantime, the Homeworld title has made its way to mobile devices and, just a few months ago, to VR platforms, which thrilled me. I immediately thought that I probably wouldn't have the same orientation problem in VR because using a mouse and keyboard felt like being tied down. And yes, I was more than right. The game's story is set between the first and second Homeworld titles. You take on the role of Tira Sobin, a new fleet commander mentored by Karen Shet, the legendary first fleet commander and hero of the Homeworld War. The original Kushan mothership has been brought out of retirement to serve as the flagship of the new fleet. Tira and Karen face a new threat from the Rada, duplicitous interstellar traders who want to seize your hyperspace core and don't care if they destroy your homeworld in the process. What thrilled me when I started the game was the sense of positioning in space. A subtle melody signifying that you were somewhere between planets, occasional sounds of spacecraft passing by. It all felt fantastic. The mothership stood not too far from me, alongside small combat ships awaiting my orders. Another aspect I liked was the intuitive controls. In this title, you manipulate things more with your hands. While in flat versions, you move only your fingers and wrists to control the mouse, it always felt like there was too much control, almost like the game depended on your micromanagement skills, and guess what? Everything is somehow easier, but over time, I realized that's because the game has been simplified compared to its older siblings. Navigating the map, zooming in on nearby action, opening menus, creating units, and collecting resources. All of it is literally at your fingertips. At the beginning, the game explains all the gestures you need to learn, but as I mentioned, it's so intuitive that you'd figure it out on your own after a short while. I've never found it easier to play a Homeworld game. Homeworld in VR feels like the franchise was originally designed for this kind of presentation. At no point did I struggle with navigation or get lost in space chaos like in the flat version, where I didn't know what to press or what to do. I was always exactly where I needed to be, doing what was necessary. As I mentioned before, there are some trade-offs in this standalone version of Homeworld due to its designed home on the MetaQuest hardware. We won't have the extensive research tree from the original game or the detailed unit upgrades. Even certain animations are simplified compared to the flat version. For instance, warships no longer launch from the mothership when you create them, which was a feature I missed. They just materialize in the fleet you choose. Additionally, you don't have the ability to micromanage each unit individually. Everything feels streamlined, but there's a reason behind it. This is the first Homeworld title on the Quest platform, and I believe most Quest owners might not have even heard of Homeworld before. If the game had introduced the full complexity of the original titles in its first VR iteration, it might have overwhelmed many players. On the other hand, not everyone is critical of what's missing in this title. The fact that it's available in VR, despite the compromises, is a dream come true for many, including myself. Vast reaches, while simplified compared to the original, is still no walk in the park. Battles happen swiftly, reminiscent of the original, but your senses can be overwhelmed by everything happening around you in 3D space. Farbridge wisely avoided sensory overload, opting for a more deliberate pace rather than bombarding players with micromanagement chaos like the original. Still, strategy is essential to completing missions. You'll need to pay attention to resource collection from asteroids. Neglecting it could lead to mission failure sooner than you'd expect. But fear not. Everything is there. You just need to stay attentive. The combat sequences are fantastic. Ships attacking in waves, executing maneuvers in 3D space, it's truly incredible up close. Lasers and projectiles filling the air, seeing ship trails in the space while they maneuver. Everything looks even more impressive than when we first played Homeworld 25 years ago. Strategy remains crucial, but planning and executing it are no easier than ever. Properly positioning your fleet and synchronizing attacks on enemies are key. Missions can last up to half an hour, depending on how thorough you are and how much time you spend marveling at the visuals. The voice acting enhances the atmosphere.
Hyperspace jump complete. Here we can assess our damage and get our systems back online without endangering Higar.
They were after the mothership and the progenitor core all along.
Oh, Sands and sinners. This is very bad.
To put it mildly.
And it's great that the game fits between the first two titles, offering both new players an entry point and veterans a missing link to explore. The game features 11 missions, which you can complete in about 5 hours of gameplay. Unfortunately, there's no skirmish mode, and multiplayer isn't available, so you can't compete against other players. However, Farbridge has announced that they'll add improvements and additional content in a few months when the Steam VR version is released. MetaQuest owners will also benefit from these updates. It's worth noting that the game includes a pass-through mode, allowing you to play with virtual spaceships in your room. While it doesn't just place ships and planets around you, it somewhat transforms your room into a unique cosmos. Personally, I'm not a fan of pass-through, but I'm sure others will enjoy the fantasy of playing with spaceships as if they're physically present. Homeworld, Vast Reaches, is true and legit good space strategy game from MetaQuest 3, setting high standards for both controls and overall presentation. It's an excellent start for the franchise in the VR environment, as if it was tailor-made for it. Hopefully, the VR version will thrive and we'll see more releases in the future because, as we all know, the future lies in VR.
Coordinates confirmed. Concentrated fire primed.
Strike Group Alpha taking incoming rounds.
Sensors. Hyperspace, engage on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark.